The other night, on my way to bed, I happened to walk by our 37-gallon aquarium and noticed that it had sprung a leak.
There's a tiny leak here in the corner of our goldfish aquarium.
Luckily, my wife and sons were willing to help, and I had one of my sons, hold a towel up to the leak to prevent any further leakage onto the floor, while I went to go collect some siphon tubes and a plastic container to serve as a temporary home for the fish. Once we had drained out a sufficient amount of the water from the tank into the plastic container, I also used our python to drain the rest of the water out of the main tank. We moved both of the filters onto the plastic container. We removed one of the filters when we noticed that it was causing too much bulging of the plastic container. We had to leave one of them on there, of course, to make sure that the water quality of the fish remained high and that the bacterial colonies continued to receive sufficient oxygen. I quickly drained the water the rest of the way from the tank and plan on repairing that tank later. And now there was a decision what to do. Should we buy a new tank? Should we see if we can find a cheap second-hand tank to replace it with? Well, we perused the local online auctions and found that there was an advertisement for a 40-gallon tank with the stand, and it also came with the light and the hood. So I drove about an hour and a half to collect this tank, and as soon as I got there, I looked at the tank and thought, oh, that's not a 40-gallon tank. But the price was still really good, even for a 29-gallon tank, which is what it actually was. And I had driven all that way and I didn't want to come home empty-handed, so I picked it up, brought it home along with the stand and the other accessories, and cleaned it up a little bit, and now the fish are in it. It was an easy matter to transfer the water from the plastic container into the tank and then top it off with some fresh dechlorinated water. As you can see, the fish are doing fine for now, although I would never want to keep them here very long as it's too small for a permanent home. And you may notice that it looks a little hazy. The water is actually quite clear, but there are some hard water stains on the glass that cause that. So once I get the fish back into the 37-gallon tank, once it's repaired, I'll have to remove the hard water stains. I really should have seen this coming. We've had this aquarium for nearly 10 years and we did buy it secondhand. And that is about the lifespan of a silicone seal on an aquarium, although I have had them last longer. Also, I didn't have an empty plastic container that was opaque, which would have been better, as many of the opaque containers are a little more rigid and can stand being filled with water without bulging quite as much. But for now, the fish are okay, and as my wife said several times, she's really glad that I just happened to take a glance at the tank before we went to bed. And it was much easier to have 4 people working on the job instead of just me. The only thing better would have been to have a Sorcerer Supreme to help us.